So thank you to the conference organizers for the invitation to update everybody on some recent exciting work that we are doing in nanomedicine. And I'm happy, you can see on the title, I'm happy to describe to you human trials of using nanomaterials. So I've been very fortunate throughout my career. I'm part professor, part entrepreneur. I've started many companies, and a couple of those companies, one of them, you can see the logo right here called NanoV, has implants that are now in humans, nanomaterials in humans. So I want to update everybody on those findings. And you can see also on this slide, I plan to talk about some other companies that I have formed. So of course, I need to start this presentation with some disclosures that I have a financial interest in some of these companies that I will talk about. These are all companies that have formed out of research in my academic labs over the past 25 years. So very important for me to disclose this to you. So I love starting these presentations with a description of what it is we're trying to solve and hopefully motivate more people to solve these problems that I think are apparent in our global healthcare system. And here's a list of problems I think occur in our global healthcare system. This list was assembled by my students, by people who work for my companies. I encourage everybody to add to this list. What do you think is wrong with our global healthcare system? We all have an interaction with our healthcare system, and this is not dependent on a particular country, but rather thinking of our healthcare system as a globe, as all connected on this earth. And it probably will not take you long to think of some problems in our global healthcare system. And I would probably I wouldn't be surprised if you choose some of these same problems that my lab group has come up with. COVID clearly has been a problem in our global healthcare system. We have overcrowded hospitals, barriers to even getting healthcare. We have medical devices that fail. I will talk more about that in a moment. We have an overdependency on drugs to fix all of our problems, and you can see this list. And we could spend hours talking about each one of these problems in our global healthcare system, for which I think science and technology can provide the answer. But to put this into perspective, I think I just need to say one thing to you, and that is our average lifetime, our average life expectancy on this earth is currently going down. And many people don't appreciate this or don't even know that this has happened. For many, many years, we have seen an increase in global life expectancy. But recently, we have seen it go down. So clearly, we are doing something wrong. And probably what's highlighted on this slide are many of the things we are doing wrong. And I think a lot of people would say, well, Professor Webster, of course, our average lifetime expectancy is going down because of COVID. And unfortunately, we were not prepared for COVID. We also lost a lot of lives, unfortunately, during COVID. But it might also surprise you to know before COVID, the average life expectancy in the United States, in Germany, and some other highly industrialized countries was going down. So we can't blame everything on COVID because these problems were occurring before COVID. And clearly, we want a healthcare system that not only allows us to live longer, but allows us to live longer more actively. Our quality of life is good or improving. So we have to change things. Clearly, we are not doing a good job in our healthcare system. It has worked for many, many decades, but it is now decreasing average life expectancy. And of course, I could have chosen any one of these things to talk about during this keynote presentation, but I want to talk about medical devices that fail. This is in particular where we are in humans and an area that I think all of us could improve, especially this conference when we talk about tissue engineering, we talk about better medical devices. Another statistic that people often are not aware of is we do not have any medical devices that are 100% successful. Whether you think of a spinal implant, which I'm going to talk about, a pacemaker for your heart, keeps your heart beating, a catheter that's inserted into your arm for IV, all of these have failure rates. So clearly, I think we can do a much better job developing medical devices that are 100% successful. Once we do that, I think we'll start seeing life expectancy go up again and our quality of life going back up. One of the biggest problems we have with medical device failure is infection. Infection is actually going up for medical devices, and there's many reasons for this. One of the reasons is we are implanting medical devices in more and more patients. We're implanting them in older patients, younger patients. So we're challenging these materials in ways that were never challenged before. And a lot of our traditional medical devices, they were never developed to reduce infection. Titanium, the number one implanted chemistry, it has no ability to reduce bacteria growth, to reduce infection. So clearly we need to think about this issue, implant infection, and we have to develop better materials that can reduce implant infection. And also highlighted on this slide are some statistics. For one particular bacteria, an antibiotic resistant bacteria that's called MRSA, methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, we have to address this issue of antibiotic resistant bacteria in our healthcare system. We created these bacteria, and we being the field, we developed antibiotics. Initially, they killed these bacteria, but now the bacteria have developed a resistance around these antibiotics, and we don't have antibiotics to kill these bacteria. So our traditional thought process in healthcare is develop an antibiotic, kill the bacteria, but then the bacteria develops a resistance to that antibiotic. So we try to develop a new antibiotic, and that might work for a little while, but then the bacteria develops a resistance to that antibiotic. So we clearly have an issue, and we're constantly going to be going in this circle unless we come up with ways to kill bacteria that don't rely on antibiotics. So just to highlight this problem to you, in the US, we have a Centers for Disease Control, the CDC. They have predicted that by 2050, this problem will be so bad that one person every 3 seconds is going to die from an antibiotic resistant bacteria. That's alarming. They've also predicted by 2050, more people will die from antibiotic resistant bacteria than all cancers combined. And we all have a story of where cancer has affected somebody in our lives, somebody we know. Well, we're about to have a lot more stories of where antibiotic resistant bacteria have affected people we know or people in our family. So my effort has been, can we decrease, eliminate implant failure due to infection without using an antibiotic? And I'm happy to report to you today some new results that we think we've done this. It's still pending. We're still collecting data, but so far we have eliminated implant infection by using nanotechnology, as I'll talk about. One of the specific implants I'll talk about is used in the spine. And we've been able to create nanotextures on that spinal implant that over the past 6 years, we've implanted these in about 30,000 patients. We haven't seen any signs of infection. The orthopedic surgeons who are using these materials have not reported any infection. So we're doing this without an antibiotic, but using nanotextures. And it's important to keep in mind that the industry average for spinal implant failure in the United States is about 5 to 10%. So we've gone from 5 to 10% failure to 0% failure. So is this the the clue. Is this the approach we should be taking for all implants that we're using in the body to hopefully get to a point where we have 100% success? And by the way, the US FDA maintains a website listed on this slide. It's called the MAUD database that you can check this. You can type in whatever implant your doctor wants to give you. You can go to this website. You can type in that medical device, the company that makes it, and you can see for yourself, is that device failing? And obviously, I'm on this website all the time. I went on this website this morning to double check to make sure that our implants are still 100% successful, and they are, because every orthopedic surgeon has to report, every surgeon, not just orthopedic, every surgeon has to report failure on this website. So we're super excited that it appears none of these implants have failed. Here's 3 of them that I have direct impact with, that my startup company NanoV, the logo listed here, has been creating, and we've been implanting into patients. So the big one, where there's been over 30,000 implanted in humans, is called a pedicle screw. And here you can easily see an X-ray of a spine. These are titanium-based screws. They've been modified to have a nanotexture. And again, 30,000 have been implanted, and we haven't seen, nobody has reported any cases of infection or any cases of failure. But there's another implant we've also been working on. This one in the middle. It's a bigger spinal implant. It's called a fusion device. It has a little more material. This material is silicon nitride, so different than this material of titanium. And that silicon nitride has also been nanotextured through a different process, but it has a nanotexture, and we're seeing the same result. In about 4,000 people, these have been implanted, and we haven't seen any cases of implant failure. A third material that we have experience with is implanted into diabetics, and these are foot screws. If you're a diabetic or you know someone who has diabetes, you know they have an increased chance for medical device infection. And that's because unmetabolized sugar in their bodies is food for bacteria. So failure rates for these kinds of implants in diabetics are higher. In some cases, they approach 20%, 25% failure due to infection. So we're really challenging this idea of nanotexturing implants by putting this on foot screws that are inserted into diabetics. This is a different chemistry, calcium phosphate based chemistry, but same idea. We've figured out a way to create a nanotexture on that implant. About 1,500 have been implanted. And again, we're seeing no cases of infection, no cases of failure over the past 6 years. So these 3 implants, very important. They're different devices, different chemistries, but the one thing they have in common is they are all nanotextured. We figured out a way to put a nanotexture on there to decrease bacteria colonization, which is decreasing infection. And over this past summer, we had a real breakthrough because we are now collaborating with Medtronic. Medtronic is one of the top 3 medical device companies in the world. They have acquired this technology, and they are going to put it on their own spinal implant. So here's the packaging of their spinal cage that they use. It's basically a polyether ketone PEEK base material coated with titanium, and that titanium is nanotextured. And you can see the back of their packaging highlighting how attractive all of these nano features are to increasing bone growth and decreasing infection. So we're about to get a lot more data because Medtronic will be selling these to orthopedic surgeons to insert into patients. So we're going to get thousands and thousands of more cases to see, does this hold true? Are we still able to eliminate implant infection through the use of these surfaces? And by the way, here's what that surface looks like: a scanning electron microscope picture of those pedicle screws made out of titanium. We anodize that surface to possess these nanotubes. So these nanotubes are what we think is the secret. That is what's creating a nanotexture to basically inhibit bacteria attachment and promote bone growth. So, in a more fundamental reason, why is this happening? I showed you a picture of that nanotexture that we create. We have human data showing no implant infection, but what's the fundamental reason? And this is a very interesting thing to consider. A lot of people who are looking at nanotexturing, nanotechnology for medical devices will say the reason is because they're mimicking the body. And yes, it's true. In bone, in vascular tissue, in skin, in all tissues of the body, we have nanomaterials naturally, proteins. Proteins are natural nanomaterials. Cells make proteins. Cells live in proteins. So it makes sense to use nanotextures, nanomaterials in the body. But I want to go a little deeper in terms of explaining why we think these surfaces work. Mimicking nature is great, but I think we can be more scientific in understanding how these surfaces are able to repel bacteria without using antibiotics and promote bone growth or promote tissue growth. And to me, it all starts with controlling protein absorption. As we know, when you put an implant in the body, the first thing that will happen, water absorbs. We are very hydrophilic people. 75% of our bodies are water, but in that water are ions, calcium, phosphate, potassium, sodium, and proteins. So proteins, in fact, comes from the Greek word, a Greek word, which means of first importance. So proteins immediately adsorb to the surface of your implant. And we have thousands of proteins in our body. So the type of protein that adsorbs, the way it adsorbs, will determine if cells attach. Do stem cells attach? Do bone cells attach? Or can we repel bacteria? Can we repel inflammatory cells? All by controlling protein adsorption. The other thing we know about proteins is not only that they immediately adsorb to an implant surface after insertion, but proteins have different charges. They're all composed of different amino acids. Yes, they have a carboxyl group on one end, an amine group on the other end, but in between are all these different amino acids. And we characterize amino acids by their charge, right? We have acidic amino acids, basic amino acids, aliphatic amino acids. So we have all these different charged amino acids, which give proteins different charges. So if we start putting a nanotexture on an implant, we can change the surface energy of that implant to interact with different proteins, promote some proteins to adsorb, and keep other proteins from adsorbing. So all we have to know is what proteins do we want to adsorb? We can get proteins to adsorb that repel bacteria. We can get proteins to adsorb that promote stem cell function, promote stem cell differentiating into osteoblasts, promote protein absorption that repel inflammatory cells to keep inflammation from occurring. So that's the deeper reason. We are changing surface nanoscale roughness. That is changing things like surface energy, hydrophilicity, hydrophobicity, and that's controlling what proteins adsorb, how they adsorb to repel bacteria and promote the attachment of cells we want. That's what we're doing, and doing it without drugs. So just to show you how easy it is to change surface energy through nanotexturing, I want to show you two quick videos. One is where we created a 3D printed cell phone cover protection case out of titanium. It has a certain nanotexture. That nanotexture is hydrophilic. So here's a water drop on that implant. It's adsorbing, spreading completely. This we would call super hydrophilic. It has a high surface energy. If we implanted this into the body, we would get high energy proteins to adsorb to the surface. And if those proteins repel bacteria, then we've controlled a biological response. In contrast, we can take the same chemistry, and here's another titanium-based material. These are cell phone cases made out of titanium, put a different surface nanotexture, and we've now created titanium to be hydrophobic. low surface energy. You can see the water drop balling up on that surface in this video. So we can make a surface hydrophobic, hydrophilic, no matter what the chemistry is, by simply controlling nanotexture. That in turn controls protein adsorption, which controls cell attachment. So this is all we're doing. By the way, we're using this idea in many other applications. We're using this to modify windmills to keep ice from forming. We're using this to modify boats to keep algae from growing. We're modifying Tupperware with nanotextures to keep bacteria from growing in Tupperware where you're storing food. So essentially, this is a very simple idea, and I wanted to present to you here a 6-step process where you can do your own thing, right? There's a lot of people in this conference who are presenting tissue engineering materials. Well, if you want to modify the nanotexture of your tissue engineering material to make it better for whatever your application is, maybe you're doing cartilage growth, maybe you're doing bone like we are, orthopedic growth. In all cases, we want to decrease bacteria, that's for sure, bacteria attachment and infection. But here's what you can do in your own lab if you want to turn this into practice. So the first step is maybe you want to collaborate with us. And I encourage you, if you do, send me an email, let's collaborate. If we do that, I need you to send me your starting material. What's the material you're currently working with? Obviously, if you want to do this in your own lab, you have one less step to do. You don't have to give us an implant. Do this on your own. Step 2 is we have to figure out what is the energy of your starting material. So maybe you're 3D printing a tissue engineering material. Maybe your polymer cast mold process. We need to figure out what is your starting surface energy. We do that through contact angles. So here's a picture of a contact angle. Measure that angle, put it into what's called the Owens-Wendt theory in step 3, and we can calculate what is your surface energy of your starting material. Now, step 4, things get complicated. We've developed an equation, an empirically derived equation that predicts what size of nanofeature you should put on your material to make it reduce bacteria attachment. And in the case of orthopedics, promote bone growth. Here's our equation. So the number we just calculated on your implant goes here. We also know through years of research what the surface energy should be if you want a good orthopedic material. So if you want an orthopedic material that reduces infection, promotes bone growth, your surface energy should be 42.5 millinewtons per meter. And that's because proteins that repel bacteria, proteins that promote bone cell attachment, those proteins have a surface energy of 42.5 millinewtons per meter. So you take that number, put it in right here in the equation. We have a fudge factor. The Greek letter rho is 0.3182 for titanium. We have different numbers for different chemistries. But for titanium, which we're doing here, we followed this for our screw example that I talked about, which is in 30,000 humans and is not failing. Take that number, put it in right here. Then all you have to do in this equation, it's a line equation, is calculate what the roughness, REFF, should be to transition your material into one that has a surface energy of 42.5. And if you do that, in this particular example, for this particular screw, orthopedic screw, your roughness should be 60.5 nanometers. And that's exactly that nanotubular surface that I showed you. That has a roughness of 60.5 nanometers. So step 5, you estimate that roughness. We just did that mathematically through that equation. Step 6, figure out a way to create that roughness for the titanium. As I mentioned, anodization is a process. We followed this also for our silicon nitride chemistry, and we came up with a roughness, different roughness, because it's a different chemistry. And we were able to create that chemistry roughness by using laser etching. So we used a laser to etch the surface to give us that optimal roughness. The third example I talked about, the calcium phosphate screws that are going into the feet for diabetics. Calcium phosphate, different chemistry, so that number, rho, was different, came up with a different roughness. and we used nanoparticles of calcium phosphate to make that roughness that is suitable. We've also followed this for other tissues and other applications where we have different numbers that you can plug in. And it works in all of these cases. So super excited that this is a mathematical way to predict what nanoscale roughness you should put on your implant to eliminate infection and promote tissue growth. So again, here's the type of roughness we created on our titanium screws. That roughness is 60.5 nanometers. So exactly matches our equation, exactly matches our prediction, and it's now working in humans. So super excited that this is working. We do have a trademark. We call it nano optimized. So if you work with us, we can give you the stamp of approval that your implant has been nano optimized for success. So I can retire. I still can't believe in my career, I've gone from supervising a PhD student who helped come up with this idea, anodized orthopedic spinal screws to have these features. We did in vitro studies, we did animal studies, we formed a company. We have a great CEO of that company who got through the FDA. We're in humans. It's just, amazing to me in my career that I've been able to bring something all the way through, and we're now helping humans. But of course, as we all know, scientists are a very difficult bunch of people, and we're never happy. We always look at things, we're always trying to improve things. We're so critical as a group, but it's wonderful because now I'm not retiring, I'm not done, and I'm looking for other things. Well, how else can we help human health? Let's go back to our list of problems in our global healthcare system, come up with solutions. What else can we do? And obviously, the one thing I'm very focused on right now is taking this idea to other tissues. So in the remaining 5 minutes or so that I think I have, what are we doing with other tissues? We are following the same thought process. Nanotexturing changes surface energy, changes initial protein absorption to control cell effects, cell responses for other tissues. None of these other approaches are approved by the FDA. Some of them we've submitted things to the FDA and we're waiting to hear. We're optimistic that just like our orthopedic work, we'll be able to get some FDA approved materials that can really help with other tissues. But just to give you a snapshot, we followed the same idea for ligament, tendon, orthopedic soft tissue repair, where we can take materials currently being used to repair those tissues, nanotexture them. We've done sheep studies and other animal studies where we can actually grow orthopedic soft tissue off of these metals once they have a nano texture, the appropriate nano texture. And this is much different than what occurs today. If you've torn your ligament or tendon, you know that the approach today does not involve growing the tendon or ligament off of the medical device that's used to repair that tissue. But we can create a nanotexture and have these perpendicular collagen fibers, they're growing off of the surface, strongly attached so that they don't fail in the future. We're also doing this in the vascular world, stents, which are inserted into clogged arteries. We can create nanotextures on the struts of these stents. And when we do that, we can get something called increased endothelialization, coverage of that stent when using 75 nanometer features. And compared to today's stents, these are fluorescent images of endothelial cells showing much better coverage, which means your immune system does not recognize the metal that's the stent is made of, because if your immune system recognizes that metal, it will form a thrombus. It will form scar tissue. And that blockage of tissue will get you back to what you're trying to avoid, clearing the artery, allowing for blood to flow. So nanotexturing of stents works. And we're also using this for cell encapsulation devices. Many people, instead of using insulin needles, are proposing cell encapsulation devices where you implant a micron sphere And in that sphere are islet cells, stem cells that can produce insulin on demand. Unfortunately, many of those micron spheres are made of polymers, and the pores in the polymers get clogged by your inflammatory system. Well, we're making those walls, those spheres out of metals, nanoporous metals, where if, again, here's an SEM picture, cross section of our materials made out of titanium. Here's your islet cells that can be down here. These nanotubes remain clear. They remain open so that the cells can live longer, producing more insulin to help the patient. We've done a lot of animal studies. This is a subcutaneous rat study showing that our material, not only the pores, the nanopores stay open, but they promote endothelial cell growth, which is critical to keep these cells alive that are inside the spheres, having all these blood vessels, which you can clearly see in this image, are keeping the cells alive. In contrast, one of the popular polymer micron spheres that are used, you see very little blood vessel growth, very little nutrients going to keep those cells alive. So this approach works for cell encapsulation approaches. Cardiovascular tissue, same thing. We're thinking of materials. After you have a heart attack, part of your heart dies. So we're developing materials made out of graphene nanoribbons, gelatin, nanotextured roughness. We can electrospin those into a material that you then place on the heart tissue to regenerate the heart tissue that died during a heart attack. And here's just a simple visualization showing that when we put cardiomyocytes on our materials, cardiomyocytes are the cells that beat in your heart. We can get them to beat earlier, quicker than what's used with a non-nanotextured material. So we think there's a lot of application in using these materials for cardiovascular approaches. Bladder, same thing. If you have a need for a bladder replacement, maybe you have bladder tumor or some other problem, we have created PGA, the very popular tissue engineering material, polyglycolic acid. We've been able to create it to have a nanotexture. That nanotexture, when inserted into rat bladders, can regenerate the bladder wall much more efficiently than what occurs with non-nanotextured PGA. So this approach seems to be working in the bladder too. Last example I'll give you, the nervous system. We've been using nanomaterials and injecting them with stem cells, carbon nanofibers in particular, with stem cells into stroke-induced rodents. Here you can see a scan of the brain, histology showing the carbon nanotubes that were inserted with stem cells. When we combine this approach, we see more steps that stroke-induced animal can take on a treadmill compared to just stem cells alone, which is obviously better than stroke. We're also seeing better reflex function. When you have stroke, not only do you affect motor function, but you also affect reflex function. So here too, we're seeing better return of reflex function when using carbon nanotubes with stem cells in these stroke-induced rats. So the last thing I want to leave you with, and I'll have to save this data for another presentation, another day, is I love this work, obviously, on nanotexturing implants. It's so simple. We've been able to fit a mathematical formula to it. We've been able to predict, and we're seeing success in humans. But we're on the cusp of a much better revolution in medical devices, sensors, implantable sensors, where we are creating, and some other people are doing this too, materials you insert in the body. And here's an example of one of our materials demonstrated through a hip implant, where you turn that hip implant into a sensor. We're growing carbon nanotubes off of that material. These carbon nanotubes can measure the electrical properties of the cells that are attaching and growing around the implant. Based on that electrical identification, we can determine, is there MRSA? Is there bacteria surrounding the implant down here? Or is bone growing up here? Is there extensive inflammation over here? We can collect this information and determine while the implant is in the body, send it to your cell phone, send it to your orthopedic surgeon so that they can better understand what's happening with your implant in the body. And we've completed studies, many in vivo studies. Here's one that we did in a sheep where we inserted these into the spine of sheep and we're able to keep bacteria from growing and promote bone growth when these materials are in the body. So rather than having an infected implant that has to be removed, we can actually increase bone growth, kill bacteria on demand, have this information sent to your cell phone so that you're better aware in real time what is happening to your implant. I think this is an important thing to keep in mind, not only for medical devices, but this last question I'll leave you with is just remember where sensors are impacting every other aspect of life. My car has over 400 sensors to keep me safe. The thousands of medical devices we insert today, none of them, zero, have sensors. We have a lot of catching up to do where sensors also, in coordination with nanomaterials, can help eliminate medical device infection, which is critically what we need in this field. So unfortunately, I think I'm out of time to talk about some of these other materials we're creating. But I do hope I described to you how we have taken nanotechnology from an idea in our research lab, brought it all the way to humans. We're seeing success, but we're not done. We need to do this for other tissues in the body. We also need to employ sensors, intelligent materials, not just nanotexturing implants, but materials that can communicate with us and tell us how are they doing in the body. Only until we do that will we really have truly successful medical devices. So of course, I need to thank my startup companies, funding agencies throughout the years. Here's a shameless plug for some new books that I recently wrote with colleagues in nanosensors, controlling the immune system through using nanomaterials, racing for the surface where you have bacteria trying to get to the implant surface and out racing perhaps bone cells and other cells. And certainly I encourage everybody to reach out to me if you have questions, you want to collaborate. Only through collaboration can we really address all of these problems in our global healthcare system. And one last video, here's a thumbs up. These are cardiomyocytes on our carbon nanotube cardiac patches, where hopefully you can see the thumb beating, a tribute to everybody doing research and science and helping to improve society. So thank you very much.